Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today, wherever you are tuning in from. I'm Ellen Adams, and I lead the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for U.S. Ski and Snowboard. And it's my pleasure today to welcome and introduce Henri Rivers, who will be our moderator. So thank you, Henri. Everybody enjoy yourselves. We will be recording this for your information, so you can watch now or share for people to watch later. So thank you all.
Ellen, thank you very much for that introduction. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with the U.S. Ski Team, moderating this panel of excellent athletes. Before we get into too much with them, I really want to look at Tiger Shaw and introduce Tiger. Tiger's been doing a lot of good work with the U.S. Ski Team and inclusivity. Tiger Shaw doesn't need an introduction, but CEO of the U.S. Ski and Snowboard, Tiger Shaw.
Thank you, Henri. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second panel on diversity. And Henri, thank you for leading this. Our first one was broad mix of sport leadership in the U.S., representing the industry and the resorts. We had Wendy Carey of Snow Sports Industries America and Kelly Pollock of the National Ski Areas Association. And then we also had organizations who provide opportunities to underrepresented kids and athletes. Of course, Henri, you with the National Brotherhood of Skiers as its president. Constance Beverly of Share Winter Foundation, which is a grant-making organization working to improve the lives, health, and fitness of youth through sports, through winter sports. And Sean Mallier with Winter for Kids, who we're very involved with also, who is where they are on a mission to make a difference in the lives of youth through winter activities in the New York and northern New Jersey areas. And we had coach and athlete representation also for King Shaw, who is a U.S. Ski and Snowboard Alpine Level 300 coach and PSIA Alpine Level 3 certifications. And he has more than 25 years as a coach, instructor, and mentor working with young kids in the Tahoe areas. And of course, Lauren Samuels, very successful U.S. Ski Team and University of Utah Alpine athlete who is here with us today. At U.S. Ski and Snowboard, as Ellen mentioned, and she is head of our work there, we've been working on change, and through our own internal diversity, inclusion, and equality committee run by staff leadership, human resources, we've also been using an external audit and training firms to drive change. And we've been working closely with organizations who serve the underrepresented in our sport, including the NBS, as I mentioned, working very closely with NBS. And, but these efforts are merely a start, and we know that, we recognize that, and we've embarked on quite a journey here. But today is about our panelists, their successes and their life stories. So for that, to get right to it, Henri, I pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Tiger. He mentioned I'm the president of the National Brotherhood of Skiers. I was given the honor to represent that organization. And the National Brotherhood of Skiers is a nonprofit 501c3 organization founded by Art Clay and Ben Finley, both individuals that have just recently been inducted into the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame. First African Americans ever to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. We have 52 clubs across the United States and the United Kingdom with over 3,500 members. The mission of the organization is to identify, develop, and to support athletes of color that will win international and Olympic winter sports competitions representing the United States, and also to increase winter participation in winter sports. The 5 athletes on our panel today have all been supported by the NBS during their journey to the elite level. The single common denominator of all 5 athletes is their drive for perfection. Those are, they have this burning desire to be number one, their personal quest to be the best in the world. Those are a few of the characteristics of world-class athletes. These athletes dedicated their minds, their bodies, and their souls to be the best they could be. In addition to all the hard work, the conditioning, the dieting, the mental preparation, We added one special ingredient. They are all African Americans. African Americans that excelled in all winter sports, in an all white winter sport industry, African Americans that were subjected to the harsh reality of American racism, African Americans that were made aware this is not your space. America told Linda Brown, this is not your space. America told Rosa Parks, this is not your space. America told Ruby Bridges, this is not your space. Well, America, it seems our sleeping allies are waking up again, as evidenced by your participation in this webinar, as evidenced by your protests after the George Floyd murder. The list of African Americans killed unjustly would fill the pages of many books. But today, we will talk about the exclusive nature of winter sports and how America and the US ski team can make this an inclusive sport, as well as an inclusive space for everyone. All right, we have our 5 panelists here today. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves by telling us their stories. The first athlete that we're gonna talk about is none other than Mr. Justin Samuels. Justin.
Henry, first and foremost, thanks for the intro. Very excited to be here today. I think this is a pretty cool opportunity. I didn't know how far I'd make it before I cried. I didn't think it would be the first second. But this is a pretty cool thing to be a part of. Something I didn't know if it ever happened. So thanks to all of you. A little bit about myself. Dang. I started skiing when I was like 2, and my dad was a ski rep. And I think to this day, he may still be one of the only Black ski reps in the history of the sport that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean that there aren't others, but that's how I got into skiing. And for me, skiing was always about something I loved and enjoyed. And that's how I ended up here. The skiing was always a passion, but education was always the drive. Learning, whether that be about the sport or the academics, was very much so what drove my curiosity in the sport and what probably got me to where I am today. A bit of my history is that I grew up skiing in the Midwest, in Minnesota. And then I eventually made my way to Romark Ski Academy here in Salt Lake. And then I skied for Dartmouth all the way through college. And after that, I ended up working for the US Ski Team, managing and working on a lot of IT and software-based projects. And yeah, I guess that's kind of how I get started. The one thing I want to note, honestly, before we even get beyond this, is all the people that have played a role in all of this happening. Not just the people that are on this call, but the people that are, a part of all of our stories. Ralph, Andre, Suki, Lauren, Henry, all the other people of color out there in the ski industry that have gone through this with us and kind of led the way before we got here. So big shout outs to all those people. I think a lot of them know who they are, and I've been talking to them, and over the last number of months, and I think it's just important not to forget about them, in this process. Andre and Suki were very much so the people that I was following in their footsteps as we got started in all of this, 20 years ago. So.
Thank you very much, Justin. And we'll never forget those. We'll never forget our history. Next up, we have Suki Miller.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thought I'd have Andre do our introduction because he is really great at that, and I will plug in anything I think he missed. You're on mute, Andre.
Nope. You got it, Andre? We're not hearing you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can. Thank you. Great.
Oh, okay. I was like, my sister pulled an audible, so I was like, oh. I can do that, Suki. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Really quick, I was just going to say something about Justin. There are some people probably watching that are wondering, like, what's the story with the tears? Like, what's the big deal? Well, like, every time all of us get together, you add up all the years we have together, it's a lot of years. It's a lot of really fun adventures together and travels and a kinship that I cannot put in a little box at all. And every time I'd ride on a chairlift with either one of you, it would be like the whole chairlift ride would be stories and bonding like you would never believe. And even if we see each other, I saw Justin maybe 2 years ago. I think we closed down a restaurant. Like, you guys got to go. You guys got so much to connect about skiing. And one thing to add to that too is I remember seeing my first other Black American skier. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my goodness, who is that? They have the same color skin I do. And I literally did not know what to do because it was just nothing I'd ever seen before. And that kind of giddy excitement I had when I saw my first other Black skier, I had to go chase them down. I was like, where did they go? And I remember that vividly when I was 14. That was really the first time I saw another Black skier besides my sister. But anyway, I digress. I was just going to say that's where that welling up comes. Every time I get to see Justin or hear from Justin, he gives me a text, or Ralph or anybody for that matter. I get super excited. But nonetheless, a quick introduction about first off, this is a very dangerous Zoom to have this many siblings together, because I can tell laughing and saying something, and it's fun to watch Justin and Lauren interact. And that just by itself, this is very unique to have this panel. I mean, sorry, Ralph, but we maybe have a sibling we don't know about, but nonetheless, it's very rare to have, first off, this many elite Black skiers together, then their siblings. That is just crazy. Outliers all the way around. But nonetheless, to go back really quick, my sister and I hail from Anchorage, Alaska, the winter sports mecca of the world, as I call it. Both of us were homeschooled at an early age, and when you're homeschooled, you get time to just go do whatever kind of sports you want to. And my sister and I lived maybe an eighth of a mile away from a cross-country skiing arena. So we'd walk across the street and learn how to cross-country ski. Our mother is from northern Idaho, and our mother, yes, is Caucasian, and our dad is from Georgia. So my mom taught us how to cross-country ski first. So every afternoon after school, we'd go cross-country ski for several hours. At the same time, I also got involved with Nordic ski jumping. And there was a Nordic ski jump less than a mile from my house. Again, the statistics of a Black American being within a quarter mile or half a mile of a Nordic ski jump is, I don't know wherever those statistics come from, but it's very rare. And that provided us an excellent opportunity to experience skiing, because it's the closest thing we could do. There was not even a basketball or a hockey rink closer than where we could ski. Nonetheless, both my sister and I started alpine skiing and loving it, because you'd get on a ski run, there'd be no one on it, and gravity doesn't discriminate. And we'd enjoyed it so much that later on in our late teens, after we graduated from high school, we both decided to move together to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and join the Jackson Hole Ski Club. Most of our peers thought we were crazy, I think, because two Black people moving to Wyoming together. I thought it was great. I'm like, let's go. This is gonna be so fun moving to Wyoming. And perhaps it's always been my irrational giddiness for traveling and wanting to go adventure that I didn't even consider the fact that I was the only Black person for miles in Wilson, Wyoming, but it didn't taint my, I guess, excitement to go skiing and be the best in the world. My sister and I both were in Wyoming for 2 to 3 years. At the conclusion of our postgraduate time there, Suki got named to the National Ski Team, and then a year later I did. And we left Jacksonville, Wyoming, and Suki moved to Park City, Utah, a year ahead of me to join the national team, and then I followed her a year later. Both of us went on to enjoy the sport, as I call it, traveling out of a ski bag, traveling to 20 pairs of skis or so. I think we've skied on every single continent except Antarctica. Yes, I think that's the case. And I think the unique thing that you're also hear from Lauren and Justin is the fact that the passion that siblings share is unique already. As wanting to I want Suki to be successful and she wants me to be successful. And I think we've always been in close proximity to each other, that we've been able to feed off of that passion and ambition to be very good at sports. In one circumstance, I remember Suki going to Europe when I was going to South America. And Suki's real name, I don't know if I should say this, is Andreana. She was named after me. I don't know what my parents were thinking. But the airlines thought that Andre, Anna, and Andre were the same people. So they sent all her ski bags to South America and they sent all of my stuff to Europe. So we had to track that down. That was a unique, fun adventure. But nonetheless, the power of siblings is unique in this panel. I get it. But also, we share a passion now today, almost 20 years later, to see this sport survive kind of a crisis that our society is facing with diversity. But more so, like, I've always enjoyed the sport, and people will talk about diversity in this sport, and I will say that a chairlift doesn't discriminate, neither does gravity, and those are the common things we understand. So I've always enjoyed the sport, and I'm here to make sure that this sport survives the next century and that it becomes one of the most diverse sports there is. Why not? That's a very lofty goal, but I think this sport is so fun, and I want to see this governing body and certainly this sport survive and become a sport for everyone. Yes, it's difficult, and yes, we have a steep climb to make in that regard, but I'm really excited about the sport and what it's done for my life. There's not a second that goes by where I have regret. I have zero regret about everything I've done with the sport, meeting all these fascinating people, and interacting with the National Brotherhood of Skiers. And speaking of that, Henry, I think I went to 17 different National Brotherhood of Skiers summits in my career. I had to count them all and count the years and remember, like, oh, Park City, and then there was Aspen, and then, oh, we went to Banff one year. And that just distills this really, really rich relationship I have with everyone on this panel and the National Brotherhood of Skiers. So that's the best I can do for a summary. You know, Suki can jump in and add some things, but I could definitely add that we were definitely speed event skiers. I was always quite a larger athlete to you. So I enjoyed what they call red gates only sometimes, which is like, I don't want to turn, let's just go straight as fast as we can. And I probably got that from Nordic skiing, and someone's like, oh, Horton can't turn. I'm like, oh, I can turn. I can only turn enough that I can keep going straight. So I think that was kind of my thing. I just like going fast. And in hindsight, now being almost 40, I kind of question what I was thinking going, 80 miles an hour in spandex. What are we doing? It's 10,000 feet, but I don't regret it. It has sculpted me to this day who I am. Presently, I'm a first responder, and people are like, oh, it's scary. I'm like, no, it's not scary. None of the stuff we're doing is scary. Like on a rainy day, and then it freezes at night in Garmisch, that's scary. Okay, you can't even see your skis. They're just slapping around. And just having some experiences with you guys with backcountry and avalanches and just the type of life experience that all of us share is just unparalleled. So with that, that's just that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Andre. That's quite a bit in a nutshell. Suki, do you have anything to add on to that?
I think Andre got most of it covered. We did grow up, we got homeschooled for a little bit. If we got done with our work early, we got to go skiing, and we would spend a lot of time up on the ski hill. We always had little different ski club names for ourselves every year. And it was really great to have this kind of, it was like a city ski hill. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy. When we were kind of like getting into ski racing, there was a program called Spider, and it was a great program. It was volunteer run, and it was really accessible. And that's really kind of where we started to really flourish as ski racers. And it was so close by, it was inexpensive, and you know, so many kids were part of that. And it's heartwarming to think back on those days up at Hilltop, skiing around in our, you know, rear entry boots and one-piece snowsuits. It's really where it all started.
Well, one thing I can tell you, Andre, I still have that newspaper clipping of your first Europa Cup win. I put that up in my office that year, and it stayed there until I left that place. You know, everybody's like, "Who's that black kid on the top step of the podium?" You know. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Ralph. It's your turn.
All right, all right. What's up, everybody? I tell you, before I even talk about myself, you know, I got to echo, you know, what Justin, what Andre, what Suki said about being a part of this, about being on this panel with not just so many great skiers, but great people. You know, when I look at Andre, when I look at Lauren, Suki, Justin, I look at the path that they took and just to get out there and make it happen. I definitely salute y'all. My name is Ralph Green. I was born and raised in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, New York. Roosevelt Projects, like one of the toughest parts of New York that you could think of. I grew up playing football, baseball, basketball, tennis. Football is probably my favorite sport. I just love making that contact. As a teenager, I got shot in the back and I wound up losing my leg due to the gunshot wound. And I think at that point, I didn't really think that I was going to be able to play sports again. And I became active with this organization called Aspire. And one weekend, they was like, "Hey, Ralph, we're going to take you skiing." I wasn't thinking about skiing at that point. But the only reason why I went skiing was to brag to the rest of the homies on the block, like, "Yo, I went skiing, ah, ha, ha." So literally, like I tried it that first time. And the directors had me following a guy that was about to make the Paralympic national team. So next thing you know, I see him and I'm like, "Oh, if he could do that, I could do that." You know, and mind you, I'm on one leg, you know, skiing. It was in Jack Frost Mountains. So I'm skiing down and, you know, I see him doing it, but I didn't know how to stop. And I didn't realize the importance of knowing how to stop. So my way of stopping was just falling. Like I was just falling. It was a yard sale everywhere. I didn't care. I was cold. I wanted to go back in the lodge anyway. So next thing you know, I did that. And then I didn't know that coaches from the Winter Park team and, you know, the NSCD, they was there. They was like, "This guy got some, like, this guy is fearless. You know, he's going down the hill." Well, they tried to get me there. And at that time, I wasn't ready. You know, I wasn't there mentally. I had no idea, like, what it takes to be an elite athlete. And one of my, the coach that was there, his name was Ray Watkins. He gave me a hat. He gave me a U.S. ski team hat, a black U.S. ski team hat. And I used to put it on the wall. I used to have it on the wall in my projects in Roosevelt. And I had skis. And I would look at it every day, look at it. And I would always think about skiing mentally. Mind you, in 4 years went by, I ain't been back on the slopes in 4 years, but I would be practicing the tuck. I would be like literally in this corner room in the projects, envisioning myself skiing. So the next thing you know, I wound up moving to Winter Park when I was 22 years old. I called them up. I was like, "Yeah, you know, y'all remember me?" And they was like, "Yeah, of course we remember you, Ralph." I was like, "All right, I want to come be a ski racer now." So they welcomed me. I moved to Winter Park. I'm coming from the middle of Bed-Stuy to Winter Park, and it was like 2 black dudes in the whole town. So I had to get used to being in a different environment, like because I was, you know, I was in the hood, you know, so I had to go from like being in the hood to being in the ski world, and it took a while to adjust to. But next thing you know, so I trained with the National Sports Center for Disabled, and then that's kind of around the time when I got affiliated with the NBS. And Sean Mallier, who was the president at that time, he saw my hoopty. I had a little Chevy Cavalier wagon. And Sean was like, "That's your car?" And then I was like, "Yeah, that's my car." It looked like the Flintstones. It had a hole in the bottom. Like, you know, it was terrible. Brakes wasn't working. I was broke. I was eating oodles and ramen noodles, you know, and all that stuff. So next thing you know, Sean hooked it up. He said, "We're going to get you an NBS car." I was like, "What?" So that's when Subaru connected. I got a car. And then I wound up making a national team. I made the national team. Now, mind you, I moved there in 2000. And it took me like 45 minutes to get down the slopes. And I kept seeing everybody getting busy. I kept hearing people talking about the same names and everything like that. And I was like, man, I could do that. I could do that. But I just kept falling. Like I just kept falling. I failed every race. It was a complete mess. But the next thing you know, I started watching World Cup winning runs. I started studying. I took a whole summer just working out, studying. And when I said, I want to be the first person on the hill every single day, and I want to be the last person off the hill. And I said, I'm gonna make this national team and I'm gonna be the best. So next thing you know, I put my sniper gear on. I picked out who was the best person in the world at that time. And it was a one-legger from Australia. His name was Michael Milton. And I said, I'm gonna beat that dude the next race. And I kid you not. So I went from nobody to being ranked third in the world in Super G over a weekend because I won 2 Super G races. And this was the best gold medalist, everything, everybody there. So then next thing you know, I wound up moving to Vail, and then I trained in Vail. And when I got to Vail, you know, that's when Adaptive Spirit helped out along with the MBS. So I had a little bit of money in my pocket. I wasn't eating oodles and ramen noodles no more. I was able to go out and, you know, actually get a meal. This is the truth. So next thing you know, I did that. I made the national team. I competed in 3 games. I don't know how many national championships I won. I think it's like 6 or 7, something like that. But like I competed in 3 games. Torino, Vancouver, and then Russia, you know, with Russia probably being my favorite one, you know, but next thing you know, it went from, okay, how do I do that? And then what am I going to get out of the sport at the end of the day? So it wasn't just about being a good athlete. It wasn't just about being a Black athlete. It was also about, can I walk away? And these are the moments right here, being able to talk on this panel that I wished for back in the days. So like besides being a ski racer, 15-year ski racer, and I also went to school. I got my MBA out of the deal, and I work for a big company. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm just happy to be able to share, you know, to be able to share a lot of that, and to be able to you know, talk about some of the people and organizations that helped me along the way.
Well, Ralph, let me just tell you something. You are the epitome of a rock star, okay? I've got people all around the world that says, oh, Henry, you're doing a diversity panel. Give a shout out to Ralph Green. I don't even know these people. All right, they're texting me. They're sending me emails saying you got to say hello to Ralph Green. And you know, Susan Arnold loves you up at Wyndham. Our Mountain loves you. But what's more important is that where you came from and your desire, your what's coming out of here, that's why you're the best. You know, because you're just, no matter what sport you played, if you had become the lead quarterback at Boys and Girls High School, you would have been the best. You would have went professional. We know that. You know, so my hat off to you, Ralph. All the best.
Absolutely. Thank you, Henry.
You know it. You know it. Now, our last athlete, and we saved her for last because she hands down is I met Lauren when she was 10 years old. And I remember I said to a couple of people within the MBS, I said, can we get some scholarship money for her? Can we sponsor her and you know, help her along the way? And they're like, no way, she's 10. There's no way we're giving money to her. She's not gonna. I said, she's gonna stick with this sport, believe me. I said, this girl is phenomenal. They're like, nah, we can't do it. We can't do it. So I got the region to give us some money to help support her. But Lauren just showed the world how phenomenal she really was. And if you don't remember, she was the young woman that they had on that Procter & Gamble commercial. I can't remember what Olympics it was, but she flew down, and I mean, it was just a great spot. Lauren Samuels.
Thanks, Henry. Not sure how I got chosen to go last after all of these legends. Of course, leave it to the youngest, littlest sister, but I will give it a shot, and I'll try to keep this short. But as Justin said, we started skiing as a family sport. I learned how to ski when I was 2 in our front yard. Nice little slope. Actually, I learned how to put on my ski boots and skis inside, and Justin, the good big brother that he was, would ramp up our couch cushions off the edge of the couch and we would ski down the couch. That's when my parents
and
were
really
like,
graduated to the stairs.
yeah. And then my parents were like, okay, stairs, maybe we should go outside. So luckily we grew up in Minnesota where there was back then plenty of snow in the winter. We could ski down our little front yard hill. And then I eventually went on to ski at Team Gilboa in the junior race program. And again, following my brother's footsteps. But I think most importantly, like I fell in love with skiing as a sport before I even was exposed to ski racing. Justin started ski racing, so I started ski racing, and then pretty quickly I was in the junior race program, and I was like bugging my parents, why can't I ski USSA races with Justin? Why can't I do this? And I think I was annoying enough that they were like, okay, fine, you can be that 10-year-old who does those races. And then again, with the help of NBS, we continued racing. I started to see some success at a young age, but nothing crazy, nothing amazing. And we had a strict rule in our house that we never sacrificed school for skiing. And I really liked that challenge of continuing school on top of skiing, traveling a ton. And so when I made the US ski team my junior year of high school, I actually missed 109 days of school, still attending normal public school back in Minnesota. Don't ask me how that turned out. All I know is that I made it through, went to college. Now I'm actually pursuing a master's degree, but somehow it worked out. Let's see. In between there, I went to Romark where I knew they would help me achieve excellence in both skiing and the classroom. And then continued on to University of Utah where I skied D1 there for 4 years. And actually my senior year, we took home the championship, which was a nice little icing on the cake of my ski career. After undergrad, I thought I wanted to pursue medicine. I was going that route. And then after 2 years of coaching ski racing, I realized that I want to continue to give back to not only the sport, but the industry as a whole, the ski industry and the outdoor industry, which is how we're all here today. So now I'm studying sports product management at University of Oregon, and I have a career goal to help make the outdoors more inclusive through designing products and apparel and gear for women and people of color. So thanks again for being here today from US Ski and Snowboard, as well as Henri for moderating this. But I think our goal, at least I know Justin and mine, is not necessarily to tell our stories here today, but to talk about how we can make this sport more welcoming. So thanks, Henri.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. Now, like Lauren just said, we want to talk about how we can make this sport more inclusive, how we can make this sport friendly and not exclusive to so many different communities that are underrepresented. So between the five of you, I want to ask you, you all know the US Ski Team's mantra, to be the best in the world. How do we achieve that? How can the US Ski Team accomplish that? Who would like to take a stab at that?
I'll jump in. I think, when we really think about the best in the world and we think about like what it takes, I definitely can remember when the United States ski team was just kicking butt all around the world, taking names, taking numbers, and it's still happening. Shout out to a lot of the people on the team that's still making it happen. But I think we also have to think about, and we talk about diversity, we also have to have the opportunities for people in communities, whether it's diverse, non-diverse. We got to market it more. We got to make sure that opportunities are there, because if we're truly going to be the best in the world, then let's try and recruit as much talent pool as possible. You know how amazing it'll be to see somebody like Ted Ligety, or to see somebody like Andre Horton's, poster in our urban community. that may take a little kid may say, he's skiing. I ain't never seen no poster like that in the urban. I've been to a lot of urban communities, you know, in America. So so something like that, like if we're talking about stats, if we're talking about how to make it the best in the world, I think the recruiting pool, now, of course, there's a way how to get there, but I think the opportunity has to be awarded to people to at least give it a try, the same way I was given the opportunity to give it a try.
Andre, what are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking too, well, I always try to separate two things into like, there's the racing aspect and like best in the world and how do we build a pipeline that is inclusive? And then there's the industry. And I sometimes think it's easy to focus on like, how can we build a pipeline, which is another, so it's almost like two problems we have in one. Is like, how do we have an industry that can support inclusivity, and how do we support more athletes being in a pipeline? And I always think back to how Ralph and I did a Subaru ad, and it won awards because it was the first time you had two people of color in the mountains, and we were legitimate. We weren't like just actors. I mean, we felt like ones when we were there because they had a green room. It was cool, you know, we had snacks, but nonetheless, it was the first time we had two Black Americans who were proficient and experts in their field and their sport doing an ad. So for instance, if you think about where Land Rover is with USSA, and you're trying to support a ski industry, what would it look like for Land Rover to have people of color in an ad in the mountains? Because Land Rover also, it comes down to numbers and money sometimes too, but like if you have people in the mountains in Park City and they're people of color, that's a whole entire demographic that feeds the market and the industry. And when people of color see, oh yeah, skiing, that would be fun, because it's kind of planting a seed of like, oh, winter sports, oh, skiing, oh, I can get to the mountains, and oh, and it just so happens it's subliminal and it sounds manipulative at the same time, but oh, maybe Land Rover will take us there, or like that's how marketing kind of works. So it's kind of looking at this machine and like, how do we include people of color and even that. So where I'm getting with this is like, there's industry data and there's the racing. And I think if we can prove, and we already have value in supporting the ski industry as people of color, that will automatically inherently feed the racing side. Because if you think about everyone's story here today, like at some point, how do we get introduced to the sport? Are we outliers in that? And then like, that's the question that we could also answer, is like, how do you get people of color to the mountains and into winter sports? And then you take another granular look at it and like, well, how do we get them into the industry? And the industry could probably do a better job marketing to people of color. And if you have 100 people of color that show up at a ski area, maybe 2 or 3 of those kids might join that racing pipeline. But you have to start here first.
So you're saying community outreach is critical.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're saying. Marketing and community outreach is critical. Now, Ralph, you go back to Brooklyn. I've seen Land Rovers in Brooklyn.
Me too.
I'm sure you have seen them too, you know, but, you know, and you know why I'm saying that. Andre, they have to market to our demographic, and that's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
Suki, you have anything you'd like to add on that one?
You know, I missed a lot of school, like Lauren, when I was growing up skiing. Luckily, I got hurt right my senior year, and I had to come back home and go to school, and I just had like a semester left, so I popped in like my local high school, and it was very different than what I had gotten used to of like just taking home prearranged absence stuff and basically never setting foot in a classroom. But you know, I had grown up ski racing up in Alaska and being really good, and then going to like a regional race and being like, whoa, there's a lot of other really good people, and then national races, and just kind of always being, you know, small fish in a big pond. But I had that same feeling when I went back to high school, because I saw other student athletes that were on basketball teams and that were like on track teams, and they were phenomenal athletes. And it gave me the same feeling of like, man, if they were exposed to ski racing and had the resources that I got exposed to, they probably would have mopped the floor with me. Like, they were so committed to their sport. They were so athletic. And I just like, man, if they were on skis, it would be killer. Like they would lay down the fattest arcs, like it'd be sweet. So I always think like if you want to be the best in the world, like you have to draw from a large pool, and when you have this really small pool that you're drawing from, you know, it's kind of, you know, I kind of shake my head at it. It's like when you find a sport, I don't know, handball or something, and there's very little people who are exposed to it, and this one person's the best. You know, I applaud their effort. And I also wonder if more people were exposed to it, what other amazing like athleticism would you be able to see? So when I look at the ski team's mission of being the best in the world, sometimes I wonder, man, how great could we really be if we were more inclusive and more people had access to the sport? So that's, you know, my thoughts on the vision of the U.S. ski team, ski and snowboard ski team. In terms of marketing, you know, for me, I struggle because, you know, it's good to have that outreach, but I think it's also equally important that when those people come into the sport, that they're welcomed and they feel like it is a supportive environment that they are welcome to and are supported in. And so I think that the industry has some work to do there in terms of making the environment welcoming for people who do not typically look like skiers. So I think we all have our own unique instances growing up in ski racing where we've kind of been exposed to that. And so I think that there's work done, like we do the outreach, but we also make sure that the environment that we're asking people to come into is welcoming and supportive.
Well, let's touch that. Suki, you said to me a couple of weeks ago that the ski industry or the individuals at the mountain made sure you understood that this was not your space, you know, and that's exactly what you just touched on, you know, and that's something that that's not even the resort issue. That's a human issue. That's the people that are at that mountain reflecting that this space is not welcome for you. How do we deal with that? Anyway.
You know, I think it's just, I think with USSS, like in that role, you have your own, you know, universe that you can control. And so when you go to the website, does your own website look like it's a welcoming environment that's inclusive? And so it's just doing a lot of self-reflection on that and saying, hey, if I'm someone who does not typically ski, when I come to this website, is it welcoming? And I know that, you know, at a very young age, I was exposed to conversations about race because, you know, I looked different than the other kids that I was skiing with. And it would have been helpful to have support in those conversations. But it was hard to navigate that they're hard. These conversations about race are hard to navigate as adults with research and Google, which was not even around when I was younger. So I think it would be helpful if there was more support there when you have your coach that you spend more time with than your own parents to an extent, can help you navigate those conversations.
So if you're in a situation where there's a conversation going on over in the corner of the room and everybody in that conversation are not people of color, and you know that things are said, those people in that conversation need to step up and say, look, this isn't appropriate. This is detrimental to being inclusive, you know, in this industry. You know, that's what has to happen. People have to start recognizing this is the behavior that's been going on and perpetuated for many years has to change. You know, the culture has to change. You know, that delves right into how do we reach, you mentioned it, great, Suki, but how do we reach more athletes in underrepresented communities and build our athlete base? Because that's exactly what you said. That's what Andre said. That's what Ralph said. But we've got to figure out the U.S. ski team and the powers that be, the ones that are funding this machine. They need to figure out, and it's quite simple. You've already laid out many different areas that they need to concentrate in, but they need to figure out how do we get how do we touch all these other represented communities so we can have a much larger base to pull from, a much larger athletic base to pull from, and then we can create 50 more athletes like the 5 of you here, you know? And that's what we need to do. Go ahead, Justin.
I think there are great examples out there today of organizations that are doing this. And I think it's that we as an organization and as an industry need to look at how we build outreach and build community, right? Because this is a problem up and down the sport, right? You don't see people that look like you in the ads for that sport, and you say, okay, that's for somebody else, next sport. And if nobody comes to you at school and says, hey, do you want to play soccer? You're probably like, I don't know, like, I guess not, right? So, I think this comes down to, or that specifically that aspect of the issue, Henry. How do we get people into the sport? I think first, there's steps that can be taken up and down, the industry, all across the industry. Some, focusing on what US Ski and Snowboard can do across all the sports and their touch points with clubs, and how do we get clubs to do outreach? But I think that sounds like something that's kind of high and mighty and aloof and over there, but there are people that are doing it. And I think that we all should look at some of those examples of how they're doing it well. I'm from Minneapolis. The Lopet Foundation is focused on Nordic skiing, but they expand from there. And they've built a really, really phenomenal organization it's part of the city, and it's has massive outreach and is by far the most diverse population of Nordic skiers I've ever seen. People like the Gregs, Caitlin Gregg, and everyone there at the Lopet Foundation are doing awesome things. And so that's just to say, like, this outreach, it's not something that is kind of a pie in the sky idea. It can really happen and really drive that uptake in more diverse spaces with people that wouldn't normally be exposed to skiing and snowboarding. And I think that's awesome, and that we need to look at what they're doing there and say, how do we apply this to more cities and more places and more sports? I don't know. I just look at that and go, if we want to get more people into the sport, that there's ways to do it. Now, I think the other thing that's important to highlight with this is that this is going towards Andre's point of, like, how do you get people into the sport? Then hopefully they compete, and then we get to, like, best in the world, right? But there's also this whole other aspect of, like, this is good for everyone. Right? I think it's really important to state and be clear that at the end of the day, increasing diversity in the sport isn't, like, just good for people who are of color. Like, I think that we need to be clear that this is good for everyone involved. It's more people signing up for memberships for US Ski and Snowboard. It's more people competing. It's hopefully more gold medals down the road, but it's also more people coming to resorts. And buying tickets, probably buying food and bev, more equipment getting sold. Like, up and down the stack, there's wins here, And US Ski and Snowboard, by the way, if you got a more diverse audience, you have more appeal to sponsors out there, to the P&Gs in the world that are saying, how do we reach the broadest audience, right? And a diverse audience. They're looking for that, and so, by doing this is wins for everyone. And I think that's a very important thing to state in this conversation that doesn't seem to frequently be a part of the conversation. And I at least for me, I'm not quite sure why. But anyways, that's my couple of cents on that point.
Justin, really quick, I was gonna add to that is, like, sometimes people immediately look at a inclusivity program or a diversity program as a spreadsheet, as a cost. They're like, well, how much is this going to cost? And, like, don't think of it that way. As you just said, like, this will load the stack completely vertically and horizontally all the way around. Like, all the sponsors are looking for a deeper demographic. That's what any corporate sponsor wants to see, is like, how do I reach the broadest audience in such a noisy environment? Oh, US Ski and Snowboard, man, you should see their ads they're doing. And they have the largest amount of people of color in this market consuming this product. And I just, instead of looking at it as a line item, look at it as like, it's a win for everyone. The whole stack, as you say. That's an excellent word for that.
So what you're saying then is that these are some of the steps that the resorts could take, that the ski industry should take, because what they're doing right now by not taking those steps is actually working in the reverse. It's an obstacle. It's an impediment to increasing the sport.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to expand on that for a second.
Go ahead.
Because you know, today I work in product development in hardware, software. Historically, that's what I do. But I frequently end up touching on marketing and stuff like that. And in my job, if we're not getting diverse people for our marketing, we're not doing our job today. Like legit, you're not doing your job as a marketer if you're not speaking across cultural boundaries, right? And to people of color and diversity of all different kinds. And so in my mind, in that light, like, we as a sport have to step up to the plate and play the game that we're really here to play, right? And do the best for all of our people, right? Like, if resorts want more people to show up and buy food and bev and, you know, room nights and, you know, tickets, like, they need to be addressing the largest possible group that they can get, right? Like, the same is true for US Ski and Snowboard and all of the clubs down at that level. But, you know, that's, you know, that's just how I look at it.
I think something to add, if you don't mind, Henry.
No, please.
What Justin was just saying of, like, if these resorts want diversity to be coming in, it's not only a marketing scheme. You know, as we've been talking about, of course, that's important that we see people who look like us in their marketing. But when we get to that resort or to that ski hill, we need to feel welcomed and embraced.
Right. Definitely.
You know, the doors are open. Yes, they are right now. But once you get in those doors, are you comfortable? Are you safe? That's where the ski industry as a whole needs to step up. You know, are there food options that people of other cultures would want to eat? Are there these places? Is the music scene what they want to listen to? It's those things where the culture as a whole of the ski industry.
You're absolutely
so much better.
I made a joke to Lindsay last night. Sorry, Lindsay's my girlfriend. That as a sport, as a group, we live in Park City. There are never, like, what I would consider black music, you know, performances here in Park City, except for 2 weeks out of the year.
Yeah. Yep.
Sundance. You can get the people to come here. It's that the booking hasn't really caught up or tried to appeal to those diverse groups. When Sundance is here, yeah, like, Ja Rule's here, like, you know, Will Smith is here, like, you know, John Legend's here. Outside of that, no, not here, right? Like, and so there's a lot that can be done to make more diverse audiences feel comfortable, you know, in the industry, right? And that's not, I don't want to overly single out resorts. Like, you know, resorts aren't the people that are booking, you know, who goes to PC Live, right? You know, the local place where you can play music, right? Like, it's a cultural thing, a mindset that's pervasive, you know, through the whole community. Andre, it looks like you want to jump in. Go for it.
I was thinking about a baby step here, Henry, in addressing this too. If I was a ski area executive or someone who is looking for like, how do I answer this question of belongingness and making people feel comfortable when they come to a ski area, a simple solution would be to like travel to the ski area that the National Brotherhood of Skiers is having their summit at. And you will see right when you walk into the day lodge, first off, there's 4,000 Black people, or even 1,500, depending on the summit, in the ski lodge or just at the ski area at once. And just sit there and people watch the people that are usually there and see how they interact with all of a sudden 4,000 Black people showing up at a ski area. And you will see how the music changes, attitudes change. All of a sudden, everyone's changing a lot of different things. And we all know in this panel that's not always positive. But if I were a ski area executive and wanting to figure out how to make people feel warm and comfortable, go to a ski summit and watch how the NBS interacts with the community.
Picnic on the hill.
Yeah, picnic on the hill. Like, man, those people, man, that's a lot of people line dancing, having a good, I mean, they just take over the town. And I know going to my first National Brotherhood of Skiers summit, I think it was, we were in Sun Valley, and I mean, it's Idaho, right? And then all of a sudden there's thousands of Black people. And if you want to really see how a community can embrace and or not, what that's like, this is the best like microcosm of an analysis of how to do that. Because we've all been on the summits where there's some bar, I've seen someone say, I can't get into the bar, it's packed. I'm like, yeah, they're all from Chicago, right?
And they brought their own DJ.
You mind if I add one more thing?
Yeah,
Go right ahead, man.
I think also, you know, especially when we're talking about like ways to get and or keep people engaged, one of the things that come to mind, which I know we did it on the Paralympic side, was the Paralympic team, which actually used to be part of the U.S. ski team, you know, used to send coaches to camps, to development camps of like sometimes first timers. You know, they had coaches that they sent like, hey, you know what? There's a camp coming on with a bunch of people, whether they Iraq and Afghanistan veterans or whether it's, you know, different groups from organizations or people with disabilities. The U.S. ski team coaches would go there. Now, here's the importance of that. The importance of that is, could you imagine? We all know the infamous jacket. The infamous U.S. ski team jacket, right? The infamous U.S. ski team suit. It doesn't matter what type of, I don't care what you in, you got that jacket on. So if somebody that's there, a first timer, a never ever, a young kid or something like that, look up and see that jacket and they're like, oh, somebody from USS came there and they got that recognition. Imagine the psyche that it could do to that person's mind. So we talk about specifically the diversity part. If there is an NBS summit and we do have, you know, a lot of stuff in the makings with USSS and NBS, how cool would it be for a lot of the youth, a lot of the youngins that's coming up in NBS, or whether it's other organizations for the USSS, right? They take, it's called USSS, right? For USSS to have a coach there representing, and imagine how long that's gonna go. So that's just something, and those are controllable things. You know, that's just something that comes to mind that can go a very, very, very long way. And like I said, in the Paralympic team, they do that. You know, I seen it. You know, then that's, you know, guess what? Those same athletes, those same beginner athletes wind up wanting to get affiliated with different groups. That's like having Phil Knight, you know, or like, you know, you pick the top coach, you know, having them come there saying, wow, that was a nice turn. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Right, exactly. So you know, getting back to that a little bit, excuse me, how involved are the U.S. ski team athletes with in the pursuit of the U.S. ski team becoming the best in the world, and going and hooking that into what Suki said about broadening our athletic base? How much are they helping that? Lauren?
Go ahead,
I
Lauren.
can take a stab at it. As far as right now, I don't necessarily know how active they are in trying to reach other communities and getting more athletes in the door. At least from my view, I can't see that happening, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. But I guess I can speak more to what they can do to create a culture that welcomes them, other athletes in. As an athlete myself, often what I was faced with was more just the small microaggressions of like, you're not really black because you ski race, or you're fake black, or you're actually white. We'll make you white because you ski. That stuff all needs to change. That can't happen. And so I don't know what the current athletes are doing right now. I don't want to make assumptions that they're not creating that change, but I know when I was there, that's how it was. So I think what athletes can do is cut out that language, that attitude, as well as what Ralph was saying is like, show your face, like show up at these events. Maybe athletes can ask like, hey, can I go to the NBS Summit and show up for 2 days and just see what it's like? Embrace the culture, see what the culture's like, because if athletes don't take initiative themselves, unfortunately, it might not ever change.
Oh, Henry?
Go ahead, Andre. Oh, Tiger wants to chime in there.
Let me just jump in on that. So that is exactly, you guys bring up great points here. Our awareness has changed this summer, and our first steps were to reach out to folks like Henry and ask them how we do these things. How do we help build awareness amongst our clubs? How do we help our clubs entice more families into our sports, and also the industry, of course, which is the whole huge prong of this, is how do we help the industry through advertising, through outreach, through awareness, through welcomeness, to increase the attractiveness of getting involved in our sports for not just POCs, but all underrepresented groups. And so that has begun. Our partnership with NBS is really reaching out to Henry and team, as well as many of the other organizations we mentioned already, ask them, how do we help? How do we get involved? Our athletes are doing the same thing. So they're fanning out to many of these organizations like Share Winners, Yes, Winner for Kids, all of them, SOS Outreach, etc. And so that's beginning, and the first steps are being taken. We're not going to change the world overnight, but we're going to keep our foot on the gas pedal here. It's going to take time, and we're committed to it. So I don't have a lot of success there to point to, other than an amazing relationship with Henry and NBS and these other organizations. And we're focused on this. We have an internal group of about 12 people who are passionately working on it. We're doing an externally driven audit of our own organization of how we need to change and improve, rather than looking at ourselves and saying, we're good here, bad there, need to change this, need to change that. All of these things take time, and they take concerted effort over time. So we are doing everything we can as the national governing body of skiing and riding in the United States. And we do have the resorts across the country partnering with us in this way. But all of you guys, along with us, need to keep pressure on it. Totally agree.
And thank you, Tiger. I know Andre wanted to say something, but I just want to add on to what Tiger said. That if we can start to implement that, those are the first goals that we established when Tiger and I started our conversations. But if we can start to implement this, we can actually start to develop a dominant culture in ski racing. In snow sports, we build a much larger athletic base. We have Ralph, you know this. Ralph went to a high school that probably had 6,000 kids in that school, Ralph. They were the terrors. They were the terrors of New York City. Nobody wanted to play Boys and Girls High School. They beat everybody. And they had 6,000 kids to choose from. So they had the best team every single year. And I know this because my wife was an assistant principal there. Got to plug my wife, but that is what has to happen. And I think we're trying to take the proper steps. Now, we've all spoke about this, and how do we? The common thing comes up that there are conversations that are said. There are jokes that are made. That whole culture, that whole thing has to stop. It really has to change. You have to step up. If you feel it within yourself that this is not correct, you got to say that, and they could be friends, and it might not even be malicious or anything, but it needs to be identified and say, look, that's not cool. That is nowhere near thinking about that's borderline racism, and we don't need that. You know, we need to go to the other side. We need to dismantle racism. So those are the steps that we have to take as a society. You know, and all the Black athletes on this panel, they can't do that. You know, we need the people that are watching this webinar to understand that's within you. We need you to understand this, and you have to take those steps.
Oh,
Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah. Was it Lauren, I think, or Justin? Or the question was like, what have the athletes been doing? And I know when I was out east, or last year for the duel they had at the National Winter Activity Center, Lindsey Vaughn made an effort to get to that race, and she was there prior to the race when all the kids from all New York City were there. And if no one's been to the National Winter Activity Center, they should. It's the only time I've walked into a ski lodge seen completely full of people of color, kids from probably like ages 7 to 10 to 15, packed, and they're just learning how to ski and enjoy the sport. And Lindsay made an effort to get there, and I know where she was coming from, I don't recall, but she made an effort to get there, and she just hung out, and it was just being there, present, as Ralph said, with her full regalia, and just the kids were eating it up. But that plants the seed for those kids to understand that this sport is for them as well, and they can belong. The other thing is, this summer I had someone from the Canadian national team, Aaron Milazinski, just send me a message after I did a podcast with USSA and says, how can I make a difference, and how can I change the perspective of the narrative about diversity in winter sports? The same thing with Tommy Ford and Lorene Ross had reached out. And I had told people on the USSA podcast or USSS podcast I was on that it's okay. It takes a lot of energy for even the people on this panel, but I put my email address out there and my cell phone number. I was like, call me if you have a question. Because I think it's difficult for people to understand what a microaggression is, or what is a bad joke and what's a good joke. And they don't know how to, some people literally do not understand what that means and what that feels like as a person of color who ski races. So I'm like, call me, ask me any question you want that you probably can't ask a peer because you think it's racist. Ask me first, and I won't judge you, but I'll at least help you in getting you on the path to understanding my perspective. And I think even if we did that as a culture, country, like in the United States wide, it just takes a lot of patience. And some of the things people might tell me, someone else heard like, oh my goodness, like that is bad. But it's either ignorance or they don't know any better. But I got my inbox full of people asking questions. Like, what do I say when I do this? And when I'm skiing and I see someone else, what do I call them? And I got carpal tunnel, but I think it worked out. And hopefully I made an impact. But I know these athletes, if you're asking, Lindsay's particularly has asked, like, how can she make an impact? Because they do have a large presence in the ski industry, but even those people can be influencers on things like Lauren's talking about with understanding what's appropriate conversation and comments and what's not.
Cool, very good. Lauren, you had said previously, I believe it was on the past webinar, how some of those comments you felt hindered your progress as an athlete. Do any of you have, I know you have experienced it, but can you give me an example of something that, you know, because Andre, I get those calls, I get those emails, and we need people to understand, you know, we're here to help. You have to understand the problem first, and then we can assist you, we can help, but you have to understand there is a problem. So have any of you felt that? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I mean, I went to, you know, it was my first like US ski team camp. I had won like JOs or something. It's J3, and they were like, oh, here's a special camp for you guys that won medals. And I went, and I'm hopping on my first chairlift ride. I'm pretty pumped about being there. And I'm on the chairlift with like 3 other kids at Millhead on the quad, and I just remember it clear as day, because it had, you know, it impacted me. And the kid says, so are you a native Alaskan? He didn't say a native Alaskan, he used another word. And it's like, nope, not. And he was like, well, what the hell are you? And like to this day, like it was that first camp that was like, you know, here's this opening to your way onto the ski team. And that was my introduction, basically. And that's hard. You know, they didn't explicitly say you aren't welcome here, but they made it clearly known that like this isn't not a place for you. What are you doing here? And those things, you know, microaggressions, you know, they happen cumulatively, you know, throughout your lifetime. And you know, things like that would happen over and over again. And you know, you would just keep pressing on, because at the end of the day I wanted to win medals, and so that's what I focused on. But you know, it would go to like going to trips to Europe, we're all rooming together, and you know, it's always like, what are you putting on your hair? How come your hair doesn't just like lay down? Like, my hair defies gravity, it's just what it does. Like, I'm trying to just like keep it moving. And then like, can you just ask your other Black friends these questions right now? I've just had a really long day. It's like, my parents didn't send me to that school. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, I just need some space at this point. So, you know, it happens. It just happens repetitively throughout life. And it's hard. And it's another layer of work that you do when, you know, you have your main goal, and other things that, you know, just kind of come up and like they're just like little bats on the arm over and over again. You don't know who they're going to come from. You don't know when they're going to come up. I remember I had like a ski coach that would like wax my teammates' skis, but not mine. And I was like, well, maybe it's just because like I'm a tomboy or something. He doesn't think I need any help, or I don't know. But it was like, I don't know if it's race. I don't know what it is. I'm going to just try and stay focused on doing my own thing and you know, sometimes people be like, you're kind of combative or whatever. And I'm like, look, I'm just trying to just focus on ski racing and not have to incorporate all this other stuff, especially at such a young age with not really any tools or support to do that. And so that's why I'm always kind of like hang back of like encouraging, you know, doing outreach to people when I'm like, this is what I ran into when I was in the sport. I don't know what they're going to run into. And I'm like super light skinned. When I had my helmet on, like I don't know. And so when there's people and other people that I raced with that were on Team MBS that, you know, putting on a helmet wasn't going to make a difference. Like, they present as Black. And so, I mean, this is kind of like the environment that ski racing was like for me when I was ski racing. So I think that is some of the work that needs to be done. And if you want to take a leadership role in that as USSS, you have to look at what you can do to improve that and what's in your universe that you can control, and take those steps where you can.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suki.
I was going to add. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Andre.
Oh, one of the benefits I was just seeing what Suki was saying about this is like, it takes a little bit more energy as a person of color, as an elite athlete or world-class athlete, because there's another stack or another layer of energy that's required that sometimes I don't think about until I get on a panel like this. I'm like, oh yeah, they did say that. But I still had to go out of the start gate in 10 minutes, and I still had to compete. And this goes back to like, one of the most resilient people I know is Ralph, right? And like, you have to understand that people in this panel probably have, I mean, my mind game's on par. Like, I think the one thing ski racing's taught me is like how strong my mind needs to be, because over these years you have to like work through someone saying that, and maybe they didn't mean to say that, but that kind of messes with your head before you go out to start gate. So you have to be able to focus and still say, I'm going after the medal. And I remember complaining to Ralph once, or I was getting tired or something, and Ralph's like, man, you got 2 legs. And that's what Ralph told me that, and I stopped complaining. I would always whine when I'd see something, and Ralph would just have this constant perspective of like, you have got to change your perspective, and you have got to drive, Andre, quit complaining. But it also adds a whole entire layer of this energy that's required to like combat that. And I don't really think about it until Suki or Ralph brings it up about how much energy that is required. So what I'm suggesting with this is, if for those people that want to expend the energy, it'd be amazing if any of the USSS athletes want to have a panel like this privately and ask questions and say, hey, what does this mean to you? And it's just them to ask questions of us about these things like hair. I mean, it could be energy. It takes a lot of energy, but like understanding these things even before the season starts might help them. And it could be very painful for some of us to have to go through that and hash that out. But I mean, for how much I love this sport and I want people to succeed of all colors, that's something I'm willing to do. Absolutely.
Cool. That's really good. And you know, Andre, it's not just ski racing. You know, I look back at when we were children. You know, you're going into school and kids can be mean, kids can be nice. You know, and sometimes they said those same things. And I remember going home and telling my mother, "Oh, they called me this today. That's what I am." And my mother says, "No, son, that is not what you are, and that is not what you want to be called." You know, and so sometimes things are said maliciously. Sometimes things are said, and the ones that are using that language don't really understand the hurt and the trauma that can impose on someone. So, you know,
I mean, I think all of us can agree with something in that, Henry. Like, you know, one of the things that I remember is always having athletic performance marginalized, you know,
exactly.
in a lot of this, right? Oh, you're black, you can jump high. Oh, you broke. Oh, of course you broke the row mark record for the 5x, you know, one-legged broad jump. You know, of course, you know, you're the black kid, right? Like, that's legit performance that people are, you know, like I said, marginalizing along the way. And I think one of the important things to kind of take out of those stories and to pivot this conversation in a small way, how do you solve these things? Frankly, a lot of the things we've talked about today are really big questions. How do you make people feel more welcome in the ski industry? How do you get people more involved, you know, at the grassroots level? How do you get more people, you know, into the elite pipeline of color, right? Or of any number of, you know, different vectors of diversity, right? And for me, it really distills back to leadership. It takes standing up and saying as a coach that that's not okay. You can't talk that way here. And that and stepping out of that, right? And I think that's one big thing, right? That's one type of leadership. I think it's incumbent upon athletes to do similar things, right? And to ask those questions and frankly lead. But I also think that a big thing is just getting more people involved up and down the organization. And we've talked, and I think we've talked a lot about kind of that grassroots level and then the pipeline and the industry, right? But another part of it is getting people involved, you know, at the top of the organization, right? Where it's going to take us a long time to make a big dent at the grassroots level. I think we should start today, and we should absolutely go after that, right? But there's also a lot that can be done by diversifying the staff at US Ski and Snowboard. I worked there. I think I was one of only 2 Black people that worked there when I worked there. I think at least the 2 people that I know that were the, you know, me and one other person are no longer there anymore. I think there are new people of color that work there. But it's all the way through, right? And it's getting voices that are into the room that represent those different groups of people. You know, we used to have I can't remember who said who told us this, right? But at my last job, we were talking about how if you don't have somebody in the room that can speak to the group, speak maybe not on behalf of, but for, or is at least a part of that group in the room, from a marketing perspective, you're probably not going to actually achieve what you're trying to achieve and speak to that group of people. And so, you know, I think that the other thing that we can actually do, that it might sound like a big thing, but it's actually one of the most direct ways that we can influence and increase diversity and get those voices into the room, is to get people of color into positions of leadership at US Ski and Snowboard. And I think and I would include that there needs to be diversity training for not just every person at US Ski and Snowboard, but there needs to be diversity training for every coach, probably every official, involved, and frankly, for athletes, for everyone. That's how we're going to start to change this narrative. And at US Ski and Snowboard, it's in the positions of leadership as well, right? And I'm not just talking about one group of people. I'm not talking about just employees. I'm talking about the board of trustees. I'm talking about the board of directors. I'm talking about the advisors and people that are calling on US Ski and Snowboard. It's all of it. And so to me, I think we've talked about a lot of things that are really big ideas today. But what we're talking about at that level is it's such a small group of people that we can make some really significant change in a really quick way, right? And not all quick fixes are great fixes, right? But we have to also talk about that, because that is also a factor here, right? And I'm not talking about just one person. It needs to be a plural. It needs to be a large group of people, right? Because it's like, how often do we feel great making a change, people on this panel, as the one person of color in a room, right? It's so easy to get talked over, right? And mind you, you're in these, we're talking about decisions that are getting made with people that are donating tens of thousands of dollars to the ski team every year. I've been in those rooms. They're not easy conversations to be a part of as a person that is young and a person of color. And so, like, I've felt put out in those conversations. I've been there. And so we also have to look at that. And I just want to bring that up because we didn't have an opportunity to get to that aspect of this conversation. And like, I think it's really, really important point to make with respect to all this.
And Justin, I was going to say, I hear you clearly. And this is the road we're going down and what we're embarking on. And many of the things you just brought up are in flight. And one thing I don't want to do is talk about all the things that we're going to do. I would rather talk about the things that we have done and we are doing. So,
well, all right. So hold on. I'd like to take a moment to talk about this specifically. We've been talking for a long time. There's a lot of organizations that have come out and made really strong statements and really put out great plans. And I think it's time that we start seeing those plans come from US Ski and Snowboard. Tiger, I know the things that are happening. Like, I know that not all, some, but I know some of the things that are happening. And what I'm getting to is like, we got to start seeing solid things.
Agreed.
In this realm. Like, and everyone that's watching this panel, if you haven't read Burton's statement on diversity, go read it. Because it's good. And they came out that statement probably in September or October. Like, it's clear they've been working on it, right? And I think that that's where we need to get to. And we need to start making those statements and commitments to change. So, like, we can talk all day. We got to start seeing some stuff happen, in that realm.
Agreed.
Like, Tiger, I know we've talked about it personally, but we got to start, drawing some lines in the sand.
Really I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I have, go ahead, Henry. I was just curious if we want to answer some of the questions that are in the chat. They're actually about kids and clubs. Would be a pivot, but go ahead, Henry.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna. I just wanted to say, Justin, you're 100% on the mark. I know that, and it's not only US Ski and Snowboard. They definitely should lead by example. If you're gonna talk the talk, walk the walk. Let's get it going now. But there are so many other organizations within the snow sports industry that have to step up, and it's not just. We want to see people in management across the industry. And you know what I'd like? we're talking, going back to a point Ralph had made about some of the athletes and the coaches coming out, you know, there's no way for us to police the grassroots organizations, the grassroots ski clubs, but there are things that we can put in place that they have to do every year, that they at least have some conscious knowledge of inclusivity and diversity training. You know, they have to be aware of the conversations that they should not be having. You understand? But go ahead, Tiger. Let's answer some of those questions.
Oh, if we're ready to pivot to that for just a cap here at the end, there's questions from, both of them involve some younger athletes. One is from a U10 racer in Vermont who's watching this. He's a 9-year-old aspiring Black U10 racer, and he's watching a webinar with his mother. And he asks and wants to know what advice you would have for a young ski racer coming up through the sport. Would also like to know what advice you have for his parents to not only support him, but also support the goal of inclusivity that you're all speaking about.
Suki, go ahead.
You know, for me, having supportive parents was key. Knowing that you've got a place to go back home, that they're going to tell you that you did a great job, and that they continue to help. You know, it's financially expensive, but also for me, getting looped in with the MBS was a big deal. I went from feeling kind of like, it's like I got my brother, it's me and my brother, we're out here skiing, you know, my parents are doing what they can to make it work. And when I went to my first MBS summit, and like music was playing that I had heard before, and there was a bunch of other Black people skiing, and they were all excited for me. It was a game changer. To know that, like, when I was in that start gate, it wasn't just me. It was like an entire organization that's cheering me on, that's supporting me. It was really helpful to know that it just like made it so much less isolating. But you know, sometimes for me, just making sure that your athletes, you know, your child's needs are met with equipment and you know, not just skis and boots, but like shin guards and hand protector, face, you know, all that stuff. And it's expensive and it's hard to show up. You know, you're already kind of you already kind of look different, and then you don't have all the gear that you need. And having MBS support me and making sure that I could show up and have everything that I needed, and I knew that I was supported by a bunch of people, was really helpful. So if you can get looped in with additional resources and support, that's good. And I think always letting your kid know that they are enough. You come back and, you know, you're so focused on, you know, just skiing and trying to ski well. Other stuff happens on the outsides of, you know, that's layered on top of that we talked about earlier. But just, you know, being able to come home, relax, let them know they did a good job, and just be kind of just be supportive and not critical on if they got in the top 15, top 10, top 5. Everybody kind of blooms at different times, and just because your kid isn't skiing like Bodie Miller when they're 5 doesn't mean that like at 15 they're going to just surpass him and blow everybody else's minds. So just be supportive, and then check in and ask if, you know, they think they're being treated fairly and if there's any issues, because those are really, like, it's our job as adults to look after kids and athletes, and when we're coaches, it's our job to look after the athletes. We can't expect the kids to be leading this or be able to have the dialogue that they need to have to feel supported and be able to push back on comments that are made. So just to check in is helpful.
Thank you, Suki. You have more questions, Tiger? I wanted to add to that. You know, all of the athletes that you've watched today are all past MBS athletes, and I cannot tell you the personal tie that every NBS member I know has with every single athlete that you saw on this panel today. they would do whatever they could to support and be at any race that was in the area. That's what the NBS does, the National Brotherhood of Skiers. We're there to support them. So what I can tell that young 10-year-old aspiring athlete, reach out. It's www. I'm feeling like this is one of those commercials, but it's www.nbs.org. All right, you reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with a club in your area. Even if we don't have a club in Vermont, there are clubs right across the border in New York that can help you. Help you get scholarship, get funding, instruction, coaching. Forrest King Shaw is our national competition director and Olympic Scholarship Fund administrator, and he will respond to you. I will respond to you. That's what we want to do. We want to support any athlete of color, any athlete that is aspiring to do anything in winter sports. We want to be there to support you. So please, and we are a volunteer organization, so we do accept donations.
I want to second what Henri said. I think one of the most important things in this sport is building a support system, because the sport is brutal. There's 140 races, only one's going to win every day, right? Like this, you don't get into, in my mind, you don't stick around in ski racing because it's all about winning. Like winning just is, maybe I say that as somebody who didn't win as much as everyone else that's on this webinar. But I think, to the sentiment that Suki had as well, which is that, everyone blooms at a different time. Similarly, because I totally agree, I wasn't some great, skier at the age of 10. Like, I feel like I hit my stride once I was finally in college. So I think just building a support system for the sport is so important. I would just say that I emphasize that for people of color because of some of these, kind of structural, just not being as diverse and not being as welcoming in some of those instances. So building a support system, I think, is harder for people of color. And so I think NBS, as Henri's talking about, is a great place to start. But in general, I think it's about making friends to stay in this sport, staying in this sport because it's something you love.
I think I just want to extend what Henri was saying and Suki, but like reach out to us, at least to me. I don't want to speak on behalf of the other panelists necessarily, but I know I'm open to chatting with kids or whoever, whatever age they are, of how my experience was or how we can offer help in guiding the route through this sport, because like Justin said, it is a pretty brutal sport. One person wins each day. It's not a team sport where there's two teams on the court and one team wins. There's one of 140 in the race, but so we're here to help and in any way we can, as well as encourage getting into NBS and being involved in NBS in that community. But I think there was a second part of that question, which was how can we ensure that diversity continues in this sport? And I think the biggest thing I can say is in the local club level, whatever club you're a part of, is like asking those tough questions of what they're doing as well, what they're trying to do to create an inclusive environment for your kid. Or if you're the athlete yourself, speaking up. I know this is really hard to do it, but sometimes just going to your parents and letting them know what you're facing on the hill when no one else is there, or when adults aren't there, and speaking up when you feel that something needs to change. And again, just putting pressure on the local team, club, and USSA as a whole of what they're holding them accountable to making these changes.
Yeah, big shout out to all the great coaches out there in the world too, that make skiing a safe place.
Well, guys, we've been on this webinar for a little over an hour and a half, and I just want to personally thank each and every one of you, Justin, Lauren, Ralph, Suki, Andre, thank you very much for participating in this webinar. I think you've shared some intimate information that can really benefit the whole industry. Tiger, thank you for putting this together for us.
Thank you, Henry, and all of you. Very powerful. Appreciate it.
Everyone, take care. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Henry.
everyone.